Have you ever met a really intelligent person who didn't really know how smart they were? What was your experience with them? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. We have a paid summer internship program for juniors and seniors pursuing construction management degrees. 5 years ago, we had a young woman who came into the program in her junior year. She was very tiny in stature and very quiet, but we soon learned giant in intellect and loud where it counted. The way we operate is each intern will spend 3 weeks on a different project, learning a different role within the organization. 3 weeks on site as a superintendent intern, 3 weeks on site with safety, 3 with project management, and 3 on site with quality control. After each period, I received a call praising her ingenuity and ability to adapt and improvise in any situation. At the end of the internship, we have a plus delta review of their performance, and based on that review, we make a determination on whether to offer them a place the following summer. In the case of a senior, we determine if we want to extend them a full-time employment offer. Every review she received from each department all said the same thing: hire her now. We extended an offer for a salaried position, part-time, from that point through her senior year, along with tuition reimbursement. This young lady still amazes everyone every single day. She's 25 years old, making an amazing salary and absolutely dominating any project she's given. If she doesn't know it today, she'll practically be an expert tomorrow. She's incredibly impressive. I can see her having my job one day, operations director. Hopefully it's after I retire. Story 2, criminal defense lawyer here. Had a client who was a low-level drug dealer and gun runner. Most street-level guys have a very different type of intelligence that doesn't translate well to the white-collar world. Many of my clients ask to read case law. I've only met one who could read it, digest it, and discuss it intelligently with me. This guy, he'd do his own research from the jail, which isn't uncommon, but this guy did it well and would actually send me relevant cases that were helpful to the issues in his case. And when I explained to him why some were not helpful, he got it, asked good questions, and use that discussion to inform future research. There are a lot of inmates who consider themselves jailhouse lawyers. This guy was smart enough to actually be one. I think about him a lot and wonder what his life would have been like if he was fortunate enough to be afforded with the same opportunities during childhood that I enjoyed. Story 3. My dad grew up believing he was dumb and would never amount to anything. His teachers all hated him, and the first time he went to university, he was kicked out. Around the same time as I started university, my mom finally convinced him to try again to get a higher education himself. He's often said that he's too stupid to go back to school, but he speaks about 6 languages fluently, has so many new interesting history facts that whenever we watch any movie, we always have to pause at least 4 times for a lengthy discussion about it, and he remembers more book quotes than anyone I've ever met. He grew up in communist Hungary and East Germany, and he has since then climbed mountains and been scuba diving in the Atlantic, among a bunch of other adventures. Whatever the discussion, he's got a story to tell. He's the coolest dad ever, but for as long as I can remember, my family has struggled financially since he couldn't get a job that paid enough. It makes me so happy that he's finally reaching his full potential now at 51 years old, and we're all super proud of him. He dreams of being a teacher one day. He will the best teacher his future students could ever wish for. Story 4. People who are great teachers without actually being a teacher. I've always thought people who can teach others are incredibly smart because they're aware enough of what they know to present it to others in such a way they can understand it. The guy I used to work with was a phenomenal teacher of all things paints, powder coating, and color matching, blending. He had a real passion for it, and it showed in the manner in which he taught and demonstrated what he was talking about. In saying that, he was also very highly strung and had some mental health issues that held him back from doing great things, and so believed he wasn't, but no amount of telling him would help. Story 5. I had a kid in my class that never took anything seriously, skipped class, brought alcohol to class, and did numerous other things. You name it, he probably did it. But man, that MF knew his whenever he paid attention. He understood things when other people were struggling to learn whatever was being taught that day. Math, science, English, reading, etc. It makes me a little sad because he was always a troublemaker, but deep down I knew that he was very smart and was capable of doing good in school. He just never chose to do it, or generally just didn't care IDK at this point. I think he got involved with the wrong crowd early on, unfortunately. Edit. I was a classmate. I typed this late at night when I was tired. Did not think to clear that up, LOL. Story 6. Former coworker of mine. He came to Germany as a refugee in his young teenage years. Had trouble in school due to language barrier, poor support, tough family situation, typical refugee problems. Then he was unemployed in Job Center, part of German welfare dealing with unemployment. Sent him to the security company I worked at that time because conditions of employment are almost non-existent in this field. When he was on my team for an event, I, as team leader, had to show him the ropes. The event lasted 10 consecutive nights, and we faced several different challenges that were part of the job. Every now and then, he had a genius idea how to solve the particular problem. The following year, I got him on my team whenever I could, trained him, and when I left the company, he inherited my position as team leader. I don't actually know whether he knew about how smart he is, but he was so insecure in the beginning, I boldly assume he didn't. Story 7. When I was in uni, I took part in a project called Inside Out, where we would go in a prison and have criminology lessons with the inmates whom we called inside students. We didn't teach them or observe them. We were all learning together. And this one guy was just a genius. He had this way of describing a phenomenon he'd noticed and thought about without realizing that it was an actual theory that existed. Like we'd studied them in class, so we knew about them. But he would just come up with it from personal experience. From labeling theory to functionalism, he would just outline them like he'd thought of them in the shower. It was extraordinary. He was also a bit unstable and prone to bursts of anger, often towards himself. He seemed to become frustrated very easily if he couldn't explain or understand something perfectly. And one day he stopped showing up. I ended up talking to the guards who told me that he felt like he was too stupid for the class. Seriously, he was convinced that we were all smarter than he was and that he wouldn't be able to keep up. I don't know if they ever did, but we asked the guards and a few inside students if they could tell him that we loved studying with him, that he was starting really interesting discussions, and that his observations always made us think more deeply, that his presence made the class better. And just to be clear, I don't mean to say that he was smart for someone in prison. He was a genius. Everyone but him knew that he was by far the most intelligent person in the room, but he didn't see it. We were told that they would ask if he could participate the following year. I hope he did. Edit, answering common questions because I did not expect this blow up as it did. What did he do to get in prison? No idea. We weren't allowed to ask, and they weren't allowed to share, for obvious reasons. That being said, I do know that offenders weren't allowed to participate, so he definitely didn't do that. In the end, while I understand the curiosity, it really didn't matter what he had done before. We were in class and he was a student. That's it. Do you know what happened to him? Nope. We weren't allowed to keep in contact once the program was over. We actually had to sign papers saying that we would not try to do so. From what I understand, it wasn't always that way, but a friendship developed with an outside student was used against an inside student. I'm not clear on the details, but it was for our protection. In any case, I don't think he would have kept in contact with any of us. What theories did he come up with? I don't remember exactly. I know there was a lot of symbolic interactionism and labeling theory. It's less one specific theory and more that he kept on making observations and finding relevant flaws in everything. So say you have theory A and a person goes, oh, but this doesn't account for thing B, so they work on it and come up with theory B. He would read theory A, see it doesn't account for thing B, and suggest theory B. Sounds like autism, learning disability. That is entirely possible. People with learning disabilities, JURASD, ADHD, are overrepresented in the prison population. I personally have ADHD, so I'll speak mainly for this, but we're more likely to get into self-medication, commit petty crimes, poor self-control, be irresponsible with money, self-control again, lose a job due to low attendance or poor performance, that's just due to all the executive dysfunction, get into debt, all of the previous ones. Since this kind of thing happens since childhood, you learn very quickly that there's no point in even trying since you're going to fail anyways. So you don't try. It also affects your emotional management. It makes it harder to react calmly and might make you come across as aggressive, People then think you're doing it on purpose and give up on you. After all, if you don't help yourself, why would they help you? Now here's the thing. I was raised privileged. I was upper middle class, went to a private school, had tutors when needed, and had two parents who could help me with homework. My family was also very into academics, so general enrichment was encouraged. And thanks to all of that and to being diagnosed before uni, I managed my ADHD mostly very well. But imagine if your school has no resource so your teacher can't focus on you and you fall behind. If you have to work or take care of your siblings so you can't study, if your family doesn't prioritize learning so you have no reason to focus on it, if crime is common in your area and it's the simplest way to make a living. All of these factors and many others, but this is already super long, mean that people with learning disabilities struggle more and end up disproportionately in prison. I genuinely cannot say, had I been raised in the latter environment, I wouldn't have ended up the same way. This is not okay. We cannot let people fail at life because they have a condition which can be managed if it is diagnosed and if a support strategy is put in place. We are setting people up for failure, and very few people are talking about it. The I do the same thing where I feel like I'm stupid people, I don't know you, so I'm not going to placate you by telling you you're intelligent. I don't want to be condescending. I will say, however, that unless you're meh, I'm not the smartest, but I don't care much. This kind of thought pattern is bad for you. I don't want to start a whole new novel-length post, so I'll go straight to the point. Don't bully yourself. Being a dick to yourself will only make you feel like and will make it harder for you to achieve your goals, whatever they may be. And you might think that you deserve to feel like, I can't do X and Y, bull. Do you think bullying yourself will actually make you do things better? It won't. Being kind to yourself is difficult, but wholly will it change your life. It will allow you to be more resilient, to be a better problem solver, to get farther. It also feels really nice to always have a person in your corner, yourself. So don't judge yourself. Also, intelligence is relative. There are multiple types of intelligence, blah, blah. You know those things. The very specific overlap of, I have very clever ideas, but I forget stuff all the time, so really I'm not clever. Is it possible you have ADHD? I'm only saying that because I felt that vibe in multiple posts. Go on our ADHD, watch some videos, and see what you think. Story 8. My mother. She was raised in a poor abusive family and left school very early to escape. Even now she'll say how she is uneducated, which is true, but she ain't stupid. She raised a bunch of us without much money and was always resourceful and canny at making ends meet. She can do fairly complicated math in her head, does extensive research before making large purchases, forwards me screenshots of quite sophisticated scam emails and tells me why they're fake. She's 78 now and has always embraced new tech, has no trouble using her smartphone or her PC. She even troubleshoots for her neighbors. She still lives in the same poverty-stricken area we grew up in and is often helping her neighbors advocate for themselves, writing letters, telling them who to contact and what to say. She's also a keen observer of humans. She sees them as they are and takes them as they are with no judgment. She was always progressive for her time and passed down zero racism or other prejudices to us kids. I wonder what she could have done if she had the opportunities she made damn sure we had. Edit. So many awards. Thanks, guys. I'm going to show this to my mom so she can see all these lovely responses. Story 9. Someone mentioned already, but people who can easily teach others complex systems or ideas. My husband is this person, microbiologist, workflow management, and plays D&D on his downtime. He can analyze a difficult concept, distill the relevant information, make it easily accessible to someone, and teach it in a patient, unassuming manner quickly without making the other party feel stupid or uninformed. He's modest as hell. He has no idea how hard it is to educate people. Never trying to one-up or show off his knowledge. He's charismatic and emotionally intelligent. Honestly, has no idea how rare his level of kindness and intelligence are in others. He's the best person I've ever met. Story 10. My dad. He's dyslexic and growing up in the education system in the 70s. Didn't provide any support, so he's all but illiterate. He left school at 15 with no qualifications. He always says he's stupid, and it upsets me so much. He won't believe it when we tell him he's not. Me, my mom, and my sister all have education beyond degree level, and he's smarter than any of us. He's eloquent, but sometimes mispronounces new words that he's heard in a different accent. Our accent is heavy on the R sound, so I've noticed him adding it to words that don't have R's. But of course, he's never seen it written down to know. He watches historical documentaries and tells us about how that links with the one he watched a couple of years prior. He once drove me to university 3 hours away, using the route he'd driven in reverse once, without checking a map. I wish he could see himself as intelligent. ETA, since it seems like a lot of people have a connection with this comment and will enjoy this story. He did actually do a speech for my wedding. I was worried about asking him because I wasn't sure how he'd manage and didn't want to put pressure on him, but he was keen to do it. My mom made cue cards with picture hints, and they did not help him. He just had it written out and learnt it off by heart and used cue cards with the full speech to help him. He can read it when he knows what it says. And his speech was by far the most confident and well-performed speech out of all of us. Give him a birthday card with more words than happy birthday and is not happy, but he can smash out a full-on speech with no hesitation. Story 11. I'm volunteer staff at a math summer camp targeted at children who like doing math. Most of the kids that we get are the standard, doing well in school with good grades to prove it type. But it frequently happens that some kid is signed up and the parents tell us that their child doesn't really do well in school in general, or math in particular, but they just like doing math-related puzzles. That's cool because that's all we ask for. And often enough, these kids come with very interesting insights and solutions because they happen to approach the problems from a different angle than the majority. They may be quite intelligent, but not in a way that expresses itself well within the standard framework of education. The same thing happens on the EQ social level. A few years back, we got a sign up where the parents warned us that their son had great difficulties making friends or socializing in general. On the first day of camp, the kid took a chessboard and went to sit down to play against himself. Perfectly fine. But not much later, another boy walks up to him and asks if he can join the game. They start playing and talking, and they end up being practically inseparable the rest of the week. The kid that had difficulties making friends just made a new best friend faster than anyone else there. Just need to give people the right environment. Story 12. My mom's boyfriend. We have a variety of specialists in my family, from medicine to art to education to software. We go around the table at family gatherings and try to stump him with questions. He's never gotten one wrong to date. He just knows everything about everything. Obviously, he has a photographic memory, reads voraciously, and delivers car parts for a living. Story 13. I work in manufacturing, so we get a lot of uneducated people. There are a lot of people out there who are smart, but for various reasons weren't properly served by the public schools. They might be barely literate or can hardly string two words together coherently, but they solve problems beautifully or always have workable ideas, or they talk about ideas rather than people or events. It's hard to quantify, but you know it when you see it. Story 14. I knew a guy who very smart with the ability to be extremely manipulative and had no idea. He always got good grades in school, often without studying much at all. What was more impressive was his ability to read people's body language, vocal tone fluctuation, and micro-expressions. Often he would know what emotions someone was feeling and how best to proceed. The guy was a master at subtle communication, such as mirroring and framing conversations so he would be dominant. He was able to use this social intelligence to get with girls, but he would also use it to get people to do things he wanted. One of the clearest examples of manipulation that I know of is that he got his friend to break up with his longtime girlfriend. His friend's girlfriend was kind of a drag and would be a little annoying around the group. So he subtly started to slip in emotional and logical suggestions whenever he saw his friend in a moment of emotional vulnerability. Within a week, his friend ended the relationship. Story 15. I grew up with a kid who was one of the smartest people I ever met. He was in all the excelled classes, a straight A student. Academics came so easily to this guy. He could have went to any college he wanted. Well, he just couldn't stay out of trouble, living the thug life, selling, running with wannabe gangsters. Well, it's been 20 years or so since we have been out of high school, and he has done a few stints in prison, still lives with his parents, make a meager living selling pot. It's crazy seeing so much potential lost. Story 16. The people that strike me are the ones that eliminate the wrong conclusions, somehow before solving an answer. The wrong conclusions just do not dawn on them. Met a lady that went to an Ivy League school. She could talk to you and hold a nice conversation. She could then turn around and talk to someone else at a higher level. Then, when asked a technical question out of her field of expertise, she could give you a complex answer. She spoke to people on whatever level they were speaking on. I have a friend of the family that took every class at a community college before going on to get his degree. He retained all of that information. Interestingly, he liked to speak in basic terms and hold everyday conversations. If he got shunned at a party, he would initially ignore it and keep hanging out with you. Eventually, as the people who shunned him came to a point where they had to stop their conversation, he would butt in. They often could not figure out the answer to what they were talking about. He would just chime in with a smile and explain the rest of the concept to them. Then he would turn back to you and keep bolting. I've seen him do that multiple times. Story 17. My friend in high school thinks he's dumb, but has an absolutely phenomenal knowledge of politics and the legal economic system. He has dyslexia, but you wouldn't be able to tell because he reads more seamlessly than most of the rest of us. I wish he would recognize how smart he was, because I think he doesn't aim as high as he could achieve, because he doesn't think he's smart enough. Story 18. My current girlfriend is actually extremely smart. Her intuition is very good with people. Her problem-solving skills are impressive in situations where she is comfortable, and she has a very deep understanding of the human psyche. But her mother has been gaslighting her since childhood, trying to keep her fully reliant on her. I have held my tongue at points just to try and not be that boyfriend that ruins a relationship, but instead just show her how smart she really is. And where she might have a weak point that I may be able to help, I walk her through my thought process and she picks it up very quickly. I always wonder how far she could be at this point in her life had her mother just supported her instead of tear her down. But just in the short time I have been dating her, I have seen her grow a lot, and I'm very excited to see where she can soar off to. I just hope that she takes me with her. Story 19. My brother. Everyone used to tell him that he was just average just because he got average grades. But this kid is so smart. He's a huge history buff, and one time spent about half an hour explaining to me the importance of some Civil War battle and how it was pivotal in helping the Union win the war. I don't remember the exact details because all I could think about was the level of depth he got into just explaining and analyzing, and also explaining in a way that helped me to understand at the time. My brother's intelligence is the definition of quality, and I'd shout that from the rooftops because as his older sister, I'm so proud of him. Story 20. I have one. As a psychiatric doctor, one of my jobs is community management of patients right after they finish an inpatient admission, so they are only slightly better, not fully recovered. One guy came into clinic, and my boss for some reason described him to me as a bit simple. I don't know if she was trolling me or if she just completely misread him, because he remains one of the smartest patients I ever had. He rocks up in high-vis gear with concrete on his work boots and speaks in a broad accent. He often says stuff like, "Oh, I don't know about any of that," or "Mate, I haven't got time for this." But this guy was sharp as a tack. Anytime I would bring up a point of psychoadduction to help him understand his bipolar disorder, he would grasp the concept before I had finished explaining it. I still use his words today with other patients about the similarities between anxiety and depression. Doc, it's like anxiety and depression are brother and sister. Holds two fingers up and crosses them. They aren't the same, but they are clearly related. I was floored. It was way better than whatever garbage I was going to say. He got well really fast. He just understood things so quickly and was so open to new information. He could apply anything new to his own experience instantly. Uncanny. He had no idea how smart he was, because he just assumed smartness was for people with a university degree. I had to tell my boss they were completely wrong about him, but I don't know she ever took the time to update her initial assessment. Story 21. I think some people just choose a quieter and more simple life despite their intelligence. I worked as a hospital porter for a few years when I was a teen, and one of my fellow porters was this brilliant chap who would skim through the paper on his break, then go off on some glorious leftist rant like the leader of a union back in the 70s. His political knowledge was unbelievable. He could easily have been an MP, but was happier as a porter. Story 22. My husband. He was always told in school he could do better. His parents have said to him in front of me he's not very bright. They assume because he works with computers all day, he just plays video games all the time. He got terrible grades in school and dropped out of university. He could always do better in school because he was bored. He got terrible grades because he was told he'd do badly by his parents, his teachers, basically everyone in his life. His parents don't understand what he does at all. He doesn't work with computers all day, and he doesn't have time to be playing video games all day. When I met him, we working in the same company, I witnessed that company hold him back for 5 years because he was useful where he was. It was just very good timing when he applied for a different job in the same company, but a different department and location. He got the job and was allowed to transfer within a week because a higher-up was on annual leave and couldn't object. The original department had to hire 8 people to replace him when he left. He's since been hired by a different company and is flourishing. He's had several promotions and pay rises, is on good terms with everyone in the company, from the group CEO to the cleaners in his office, and is treated with respect by everyone he works with. While he can't do simpler maths without a calculator, he can do complex quantum equations in his head. His father had the audacity to say, "You've always been bad at maths." To which my husband, who has had enough of his parents' bull, replied, "My maths might be bad, but it's good enough to know I earn more than you combined," in reference to both of his parents. I'm a super proud wife. Story 23. I barely graduated high school, rough upbringing, ADHD, anger issues, thought I was dumb, didn't fit in, etc. Parents forced me to go to community college, taking pre-credit courses and failing them. Ran into a guy from my high school, extremely smart and a great teacher. IDK what made me ask him for help with a homework question, but I am so glad I did. For some reason, he could see the potential in me. Homie would help me study hours each week, make me work for the answers, never gave up on me. Got me taking college credit classes and kept increasing my confidence. 2 years later, I got a full-ride scholarship to UW-Madison for the BSNRN degree, and now work in a cardiac ICU. I owe that dude everything. Never thought I would accomplish any numerous milestones. You're my boy, Bryce. Story 24. I knew a shaved-head Mexican gang member in high school who made it to calculus without doing any studying or homework outside of just the class time. Because of this, his grades were always at a B+ level, so he never really considered himself smart, nor drew much attention from teachers. Our high school was sharply divided between rich and poor, and he was doing as well or better than people who came from privileged backgrounds, and that I knew for a fact had hours of private tutoring daily, were part of study groups, math club, etc. To this day, I can't fathom how he did it. He did pay careful attention in class, so he must have had a photographic memory and genius-level mind. Half the time, he never even brought the book to class and had to borrow a TI calculator. I know he left his books in his locker before he went home because he didn't want to be caught holding a school book by his friends. I was friendly with him and saddened to learn that he was killed a few years after high school. Story 25. My cousin is 4 days older than I. We grew up together. When I used to build sandcastle in holidays, he would seat and write the list of every foreign politician he would know. The list was long. When we had birthdays, I used to ask for toys like dolls, puzzle, board games, Play-Doh. He used to ask for brain teasers or a microscope, etc., etc. I grew up thinking I was dumb and silly. I later realized I was average and he was really smart. He later went to prestigious schools and studied something no one even understand the name of. My favorite thing is seeing him at diner during family reunion. You can clearly see he is trying to choose different words than the natural one he wants to use to make sure we understand him. And all of us made quite high studies, surgeon, layer, etc. So we are not particularly intelligent but not dumb or uneducated. But he is very humble, so that's fine. Story 26. My little sister. She can look at anyone and tell you how they're feeling within a couple of seconds. She picks up on their entire body language, from their eyes to how their feet are positioned. She sees all this subconsciously, and then her brain somehow puts this together into an aura, that's how she described it, around every person she sees. Downside is that she sometimes gets headaches when she's around large groups of people, because there's so much stuff coming in. Edit. To all you saying she's an empath, she's not. She can tell what people are feeling with looking at them for a couple of seconds, even when she had never seen that person before. Story 27, Billy. I still think about Billy sometimes. I was 22 years old and teaching high school in a rural school in the heart of the Bible Belt. Billy sat at the left-hand end of the second row, a thick shock of dark hair hanging down over these huge brown eyes. He was 15 and small for his age. He looked like Tim Burton had thought him up. I was going over the definition of science and Billy said, "Just loud enough for me and no one else to hear as I walked by." Oscar Wilde said, "Science is the record of dead religions." Here's a 15-year-old pulling relevant Oscar Wilde quotes off the top of his head. A voice in the back of my head said, "This kid is smarter than you. You can't let him figure that out." He took an interest in me and in the topic and would stick around after school. We'd talk about black holes or time travel or whatever he could think up. He did goofy drawings, usually pretty macabre, and made jokes. I got to know him. I told him he was one of the most frustrating students I ever had. He was so incredibly smart, but when I asked him for his homework, he'd go absently digging around in a backpack full of crumpled papers and never find it. He could answer any question on the homework from memory. He just couldn't be bothered to actually submit it. So he got a D because he only did the bare minimum needed to pass. We kept in touch via Facebook after he graduated, and I moved on to other jobs. Mostly watching each other's feeds with an IM about a meme or a joke every few months. Sometimes I'd give him advice and try to encourage him. Billy's life and mine had a lot of parallels. His story seemed like a dark mirror of mine. My dad had a heart attack when I was 10, but survived until I graduated high school. Billy's dad didn't survive. I married my high school sweetheart, and we're still together. I was head over heels. He's married his high school sweetheart and was head over heels. She asked for an open relationship and eventually left him. I went to State U and got a degree. Billy took sporadic classes at the local community college and just never strung together a degree. Eventually, Billy started drinking. One night, he said he was going to go get on a ladder to fix his ceiling fan and stopped responding. I messaged a buddy of his who lived in the same town, worried maybe he fell off a ladder. Billy messaged me back a while later ranting about flags and betrayal and his mother being controlling. It was very out of character. None of it made any sense. I told him I was sorry and I never meant to offend him. Still not sure what I did. I will never know. He said, "I'll say one last thing." And I don't remember what he said now, but it was more of the same. He logged off. I figured he was going to go sleep it off, and I'd check in later and try to find out what was up. Gave him a couple of weeks to cool off and looked at his feed. Started seeing the memorial messages, condolences and stuff roll in. Billy killed himself. The rest of us just keep rolling along, and it's like he's frozen in time. His memorialized page still has the last few stupid jokes he posted. I hadn't seen Billy in 6 or 7 years when he died. It had all been through Facebook. To me, he'll always be 15 years old and quoting Oscar Wilde in the second row of biology. Story 28. I know a guy who can't read, is in his 30s pursuing for the first time a job, kitchen help, after a life of incarceration. The kitchen is hectic, crowded, high stakes, and busy compared to other kitchens I'd worked in previous. Racing through the day by the seat of your pants, and when the shift is over, you can hardly recollect where you've been or what you've been doing. In this fast, unforgiving environment, this man is learning how to read. In his 30s. When he makes a mistake, the more experienced staff, who would typically razz any slip-up, take the time to encourage him and forgive his mistakes as the mistakes of someone who is still learning. He's now able to work from a recipe book, pick items out of storage, or the walk-in that are boxed and labeled. Box of sugar that doesn't readily appear to be sugar, box of cheese that doesn't show itself as cheese, etc. If you saw him at checkout like he has a hard time doing math and making change or reading, you'd notice it right away that he's not on par. But within the kitchen, the man's considered a prodigy. For being unable to read or do math, he can follow a recipe better than some credentialed chefs in the house. Even more beautiful is that he is highly emotionally intelligent and always tries to make the people around him feel at peace or happy, even when he can't find his way around letters, numbers, or the outside world.